Hello and welcome to my screencast, where thinking about OneNote will allow us to obtain and consider information in a better way than before. So, as you will see with my other workshops and my other lessons, this slide engages us with some of the questions that you should have thought of before and some questions that can push you forward. So as you watch this video, consider, do you know what OneNote can do? Do you actually have access to OneNote in your school? From whom do you get the access? And finally, is there somebody who can see you to help train you, or do you have any of the sources of support upon which you can draw? And all that is very important. Question 4 here is about asking how OneNote can do things that paper cannot. And it adopts this model that my school is looking at now, the SAR model, with the idea that technology tries to create types of learning that aren't possible without it. So the main learning objective today is for us to understand how OneNote can help our study so that we can return to learning with more learning episodes, and we can also learn in a deeper fashion. So here are the 4 key points or prompts that will guide you through this screencast. The first asks us, why even use OneNote? And why not just use paper instead? And that's a key point, particularly if the learning of OneNote takes you some time and it might disrupt some of your existing systems for understanding information. 2, how can you find, source, and save the content? And there's a few things that OneNote can do here that, again, are particularly useful. 3, once you have that information in your OneNote and you know why you're using it, how can you manipulate and understand that content? And I recommend that you also look at the screencast or attend a workshop on Cornell Notes as well to really understand how OneNote and Cornell Notes can synergize, which means how can they work together? And then finally, once you've started to use OneNote and you have lots of content and you've been working with it, how can you index and search that information effectively? Okay, so the first question is this. Why even use OneNote? And why not just use paper? Well, the 4 points I saw were this. 1, you can copy content from any source, be it from a PDF, a Word document, a PowerPoint. You can even take videos, or you can take web pages and print them quickly and clearly to your OneNote. Of course, you can do this before. You could go to a photocopying machine, you could record videos and place them onto a shelf, but OneNote is really good in terms of organizing that information. And of course, there are other programs that could do the same. I'm thinking Evernote in particular, and also Google Docs. But OneNote, because it's integrated with the other Microsoft applications, I think that, although it has flaws now in 2017, it will eventually have more depth. As I said, you can really manipulate those notes. You can share them with other people. You can create audio next to those notes. You can easily highlight and write next to those notes. You can copy them into different folders. And it is that manipulation of notes, particularly when you understand the Cornell Note system, that will make it so powerful. And finally, as I alluded to before, you can use multimedia, and that is really hard to use with paper. Essentially, paper is a one-dimension fashion. I should make an aside here, though, that any kind of study must use language in terms of words on a page or on a screen, and only studying through auditory fashion or through videos, it's not really going to allow you to research in the depth you need, particularly at higher levels of study. Okay, so now we have seen this, it's time for us to see how can we find and save content. And to do this, I'm actually going to exit from my PowerPoint and move into the OneNote and show you an example of what I've been doing already. Then I'll show you how to find and save content to help you. Okay. Just some points before I do that. The content can be taken from teachers or given to you directly. You can, of course, search for wider content. The content that you insert can be multimedia. And I'll say there are some issues with the version of OneNote that you may have and whether or not it will allow you to save content easily. Then finally, once you've searched for something, you can print from the internet or PDFs or any other kind of Microsoft document. And we'll show you how to do this. Okay, so here we are now, and we have an example of OneNote where I have documents relating to the text of Frankenstein. Here we have some of the text pasted already into OneNote, and I've already begun to make some notes on this as well. The purpose of this section of the presentation, though, is to demonstrate how I can source content. So we'll come back to the Frankenstein one, and instead I'll show you my master's OneNote that I've been using. So when I create a OneNote notebook, and again you can see this from another video or talk to someone who's with you, I would then look to, in that notebook, to create what we call sections, groups. So let's say, for example, I'm eventually going to take on an assessment module. So I've created an assessment section group. And as you can see from the graphic, there is another icon that demonstrates a series of colored files. And that is the right metaphor to see here. So if we go into, say, for example, my education and society section file icon, we can see that I've got a further number of section groups. And this will move downwards through, so you can make your OneNote more organized with different section groups. Here, for example, I have a number of section groups, 4. And the way I approach my masters is the following. First of all, I have an assessment and folder in the other folder. And in this, I have, say, initial thoughts about the assessment and what I can do with this. I've also pasted some feedback onto my first draft of my assessment that I did for this. And I've also got different articles that I've used to help me with this. In terms of my actual study on OneNote and using OneNote with my masters, I have what I call reading waves, where before I complete the essay or even start it, I find a number of articles and I read them and I work through them. And then when I come to the bibliography afterwards, I look at that bibliography and I decide which of these articles are ones that I wish to know. Which of these are ones that I really wish to read. So looking at this now, I can see the articles, as indicated, of course, by the page numbers and the journal idea here. So say, for example, I want to source this article here, Refugee Boy, the social and emotional impact of the shared experience of a contemporary class novel. And I see it's by S. Habib, and it's written in 2008. I would then come to source this. So I open up my Google in this instance. Now I know that I'm going to take these from the Bath University Library, but you can replicate this kind of search with either your own university or other sources such as JSTOR. And perhaps I will also show you that in this screencast as well. I then go into advanced search and I type, say, in, for example, refugee boy, which I obviously already tested. I then search for that. I come down through and we can see here that there's 8,500 results for this. So to reduce this then, we need to do what's called Boolean searches, where we add other conditions. So the author here was Habib. We click there, we search, and now we can see that the article has appeared. Now in terms of this interface, we load it up by going View Online. And bear in mind, if you're not logged in to your institution, like we see here, you can't pick up these articles. If you're looking at this screencast from a school, you need to have access to your school's licensee from JSTOR or so forth. Once you have found the article, you want to download it as a PDF. And usually with Google, you will have an extension that means that it is printed on the screen in the Google Chrome browser itself. Now, once you've done this, you want to go to Print. You want to find the Send to OneNote icon, and you want to print that to OneNote. At this point, there's something I should show you. If you go to File, and you go to Options, and you go to Send to OneNote, by default, it will say, always ask where to send. I think it's better to always put to current page. But because maybe you have not done this before, I will just make sure that my print to OneNote is always ask where to send. So, we're now going to take this article and place it in my OneNote folder. So, we make sure that once we've printed, we've changed the printer to Send to OneNote. Bear in mind that if you can't see this icon over here, you can just press Ctrl and P and get to the same thing. You then press Print. The computer will think about this for a moment. You can see here now it's worked, and then it's going to ask, where do you want to send this to? So I'm going to want to send this to my pre-essay reading wave 1, so I click OK. And at the bottom now, this is then printed out onto there. Now, as you'll see later on in this screencast, what makes this such a powerful tool is that although this is printed as a picture, it also OCRs the text, which means that it recognizes the words in the text. So later on, we can actually start to search for keywords in the articles that we have. You'll notice that the default name for the article or anything you print to there is going to simply be printout. So you can type out that article there, or you can take the name of the article and paste it in. So I'm highlighting, Control C, highlighting, Control V. Now, one thing that I would recommend to help you with your searching is to name every single article by the surname of who wrote it and also the year. This is really going to help you later on when you have done your research and you have lots and lots of articles. So in this case, Habib, 2008. Now, for the time being, let's just go back to the Frankenstein example. And let's say, for example, we want to find something on Walton and ambitions in the Victorian era. So, Captain Walton, Frankenstein. I might Google this and see if I can find something. And interestingly enough, his website called thefrankenstein.wikia. And we have here an interesting enough web page. So what you want to do when you have this web page that you want to print, you go to File, you go to Options, you go to Send to OneNote, and here I made a mistake in this screencast of putting it to current page. It wants to be to new page in current section. And by doing that, your web page will then print to its own page in the current section that you're in. So you can see here, there's something here on Captain Walton. Now this resource itself isn't very useful, but as you can see, it is very simple to place content inside the different sections that you have here. To add a new section, you click Add. Here you might have something like Frankenstein context if you want to put only things to do with Frankenstein's context in there. Let's say, for example, you want to place Walton in there. You can click Move or Copy. You can click Frankenstein context, and you can click Move or Copy, and that's going to push the content from one part to another part. Before we move away from this section, one last thing I want to show you is that you can use multimedia and save that in your OneNote. So say, for example, we want to take a video of Frankenstein and Captain Walton here, for example. And here we have from Ravenhall an interesting video of Frankenstein and some character analysis. We can take this and we can insert it inside. Now, there are a few ways of doing this. And one of the first things I should say to you is the following. The desktop version of OneNote in 2017 has more than one version. There is an app version that's free, that's not massively functional. You can't, for example, insert videos onto OneNote pages. There's a 2016 Office version that sometimes allows you to insert videos. My school at the moment currently doesn't allow you to insert videos from the desktop version, but you can insert videos from the online version of certain notebooks. So whilst that might sound a bit complicated, let me just show you some ways of inserting videos into your OneNote notebooks. So to start off with, one way of inserting these in is to get your embed code. So let me show you again. You go to Share, you go to Embed, you go to Copy, then I create a new page, I go to Insert, I click on Online Media. You don't need the embed code for this one. If I click OK, it doesn't work. So instead I need to just go to the video at the top. It says time equals 96 seconds. You don't need that. I'll keep it here for now. And then I paste. And as you play videos,
our natural obsessions are devastating, and we should not abandon nature but respect it. More broadly, consider that the entire story is told.
And so you can see here that it's possible to take notes as you're watching the video. And this has some very useful functions. You can color code your notes. You can create boxes where you have different people taking different notes. So maybe this is Anderson taking this, and this is Flynn taking this, so on and so forth. Okay. So now we've seen how to find and save the content. We want to see how to actually manipulate materials. And as we've seen before, you can watch and respond to some of these videos. You can copy content from any source. And there are some other methods of doing this. In particular, I urge you to look at the screencast and do some research yourself from Cornell Notes, because the ability to listen to audio and to write is tremendously powerful. You can really organize your mind, your thoughts, and critically understand the information that's been given to you. So let me show you some examples now. Again, as you watch a video, you can transcribe ideas, you can type out ideas that you have. If, say, for example, you have a text and you have created some dialectic questions, and by that I mean questions that have a for and against, you can then begin to respond to those. So say, for example, here in the opening of Frankenstein, I've written the question, to what extent does Walton's ambitions present him as naive rather than heroic? And I recorded here on the 25th of July, 1 minute to 10, just an initial idea about this. So now I'm going to listen to that audio and to see what I said.
Walton's ambitions present him initially as a naive Victorian rather than a conquering hero.
Okay, so I didn't say very much then. He wants to be seen as conquering. So the idea would be for me that you would record initial response to a question. It can be somewhat rambling and wrong and with somebody else. And then, as you'll see in the Cornell Note screencast, you will then look to respond to what you said, and then afterwards you would aim to present some wider ideas. Say, for example, now on the 3rd of September, I'm going to record some audio. And I'm going to say this. So, to what extent does Walton's ambitions present him as naive rather than heroic? So, it is apparent that Walton is a failed romanticist. And by that, I mean that he speaks about how he once wished to write romantic poetry, yet he was unable to do so. And it is apparent that he sees this exploration of the far north, of the Arctic reaches, as being something of a substitute for this desire for adventure. His writing style is also particularly interesting because it's somewhat feminized. It certainly indicates someone with great intensity. He also speaks about his desire to find a friend, and in particular a male friend, who's going to make up for what he perceives as being an inadequate education. So, to what extent is he naive rather than heroic? I think Walton is a peculiar mix of being aware of his own limitations and wanting to better them, but also he is painfully naive of, I think, the difference between masculine approaches to science, where someone wants to dominate an environment or an idea or seek to change it, and more feminine approaches to science, where one seeks to appreciate what one discovers. Okay, there. So you saw then that I spoke almost a stream of consciousness for about 90 seconds, 100 seconds on what I thought about that question. This point is not yet a dialectic. I'm not really saying for and against, or I'm trying to say points in more than one way. And I would look to then come back to this at a later point, and I would listen to it and transcribe it. Something like this. I'm going to record some audio, and I'm going to say this. So, to what extent does Walton's ambitions present him as naive rather than heroic? So, it's apparent that Walton is a failed romanticist. And by that, I mean that he speaks about how he once wished to write romantic poetry, yet he was unable to do so. And it is apparent that he sees this exploration of the far north. So you can see that this method is multimodal, and it allows you to respond to questions that you've thought of before. Your learning becomes more episodic. And again, you can respond to questions set by other people and hear their responses as well. So, moving back to this, one other thing I want to show you about manipulating materials is that you can, of course, draw and highlight things, particularly useful if you have a tablet computer. So moving back now to the presentation. The last part of this is how do you index and search for information, particularly when you have lots of it. And this is especially important for situations like my master's, where I had 6 reading waves. And by that I mean that on my second reading wave, these were the articles I sourced. My third reading wave, these were the articles I sourced. My fourth reading wave, these were the articles. Fifth, and then 6. And each of these reading waves, sometimes I might even find an article I've seen before. I would start seeing which articles are referred to on more than one occasion. To find them, you can search through this bar here. So let's say, for example, I want to see something on Nash. I can type in Nash. And I can see here that the one I want to see exactly is the Nash 1999. And before I had typed out just any title, and that really made it quite tricky. Another one I want to see is this one. I think, is it Dumais? I'm not certain. Here we can see that she, and I believe it's a she, has 3 different articles. And by giving the name and the date, it's much easier to find those articles, particularly because we have the rest of the title of the notebook page truncated. If you want to, say for example, go to something like this, cultural capital, strengths and weaknesses, and we want to see all the times it says cultural. If you press Control and F, you type the word cultural in, then as you can see, it starts to find all the examples of the word cultural. And that can be really helpful if you're looking for keywords in a certain article. That actually is really powerful. Okay, so that summarizes the use of OneNote here. What you want to do is to realize that OneNote is most powerful when you use it to respond to the information in an episodic manner. You want to find and save content from sources like JSTOR, websites of good repute. If you're studying for a master's, for example, or for undergraduate study, your university website will help you as well, of course. You really need to look at my screencast on Cornell Notes as well to understand, I think, how best to use OneNote. But I've shown you some examples already. And finally, it's very important to name and organize your OneNote reasonably well so that when you get lots of content, you're not overwhelmed when you come to search for particular ideas. Thank you, and I hope that this has been useful.